It makes a desk a little more fun. A giraffe that holds her pencil. Today I'm cutting this whimsical giraffe pencil holder completely on the scroll saw, and while I'm at it, I'll test how well a number 5 blade handles 3/4 inch red oak. Spoiler alert, the results surprised me. Let's get started. Since I'm producing items to sell, much of the time I make them in batches, and for this giraffe pencil holder I'll be making 4. I've already drilled the holes for the eyes, and since there are no interior cuts on the head, I just need to make the exterior cut. The dotted lines on the pattern indicate where a hole needs to be drilled for one end of the pencil to be inserted. I'll make that hole after I'm done cutting. I'm making the head and body of the giraffes from 3/4 inch red oak. I would normally use a number 7 or number 9 Pegasus modified geometry blade for this material, but I already had a number 5 blade in the scroll saw, and I decided to perform a little experiment. I tend to choose the largest blade I can for each project, but part of my purpose for this channel is to try different tools and techniques and to pass along my findings to you. This number 5 blade obviously cuts much slower than a number 7 or number 9, but we need to take into account the fact that the blade was already used. I'm not sure how much it had been used, but after a bit of cutting I decided it was getting dull, needed to be replaced, and was likely burning the wood. I decided to complete this one cut, and when I was done, the piece most certainly had been burned by the dull blade. So, let's make the experiment fair this time. I tossed the dull blade and molded a new number 5 blade. First, the cutting went much faster. Second, with the dull blade, I felt a heavy vibration, whereas cutting was smooth with the new blade. The result is a good-looking edge. So, can you cut 3/4 inch thick oak with a number 5 blade? Yes, but I prefer to use the largest blade possible rather than the smallest. Experiment with the blade that works best for you. When watching my videos, keep in mind that my blade choice is just a suggestion. Always use your favorite blade for the job. It may be different than mine. I drilled the pilot holes and trimmed the bottom square off of this piece for the giraffe's body, which will be made from 3/4 oak, the same as the giraffe's head. I'm continuing with the number 5 blade since I learned that a sharp blade can cut the material, and because these interior cuts are somewhat intricate. There are not a lot of cuts here, and I think even a beginner on the scroll saw could make them. After all, they just represent large, odd-shaped spots on the giraffe's body. If your cuts don't follow the lines perfectly, once the pattern is removed, no one will know they're slightly different from the pattern. I already mentioned that my blade choices are only suggestions, so I'd like to say that my wood choices are only suggestions as well. I personally like cutting red oak, but I know some scrollers do not. Red oak is hard, and the grain structure can make cutting some patterns difficult. Personally, I've had so few problems with red oak, it's one of my preferred woods. It's relatively inexpensive, I like the color, and it finishes well. Anyway, writing about this has got me thinking about doing a video on hardwoods. What do you think? Leave a comment if you would like me to do a video strictly on hardwoods. So in my mind at least, none of these interior cuts is difficult. I don't have any specific tips on making them, just my general advice to follow the line and let the blade do the work. When I looked at the cut for the tail, I considered cutting along the body, then looping around the inside line for the tail and back to the outside. This would have meant making this part of the outside cut rather than making an interior cut as the pattern showed. However, I rejected that idea because it would weaken the tail a bit and make it more susceptible to breakage. Here are the 2 completed parts for the giraffe. Normally I would peel off the patterns at this point, but I'm leaving them on until I drill the holes that will receive the pencil's ends. The dotted lines show where they will go. I found a couple of long, narrow pieces of walnut and attached the patterns for the bases to them. I used my favorite method, scroll saw tape, but you can use any method you prefer. This is 3/4 thick walnut. I already had a number 5 blade in the saw from my last project, so I decided to leave it in and use it. These are very easy pieces to cut since they're just flowing curves. I cut right on the line and let the blade do the work. I started cutting at one end, cut all the way around, and ended up back where I started. Starting and ending a cut on a curve frequently results in a rough spot at the start-stop place, and that's what happened here, but the spot is easily accessible, and I'll be able to smooth it out by hand with a piece of sandpaper. I placed the giraffe's head and body in the vise on my workbench and then drilled holes to accept the pencil. Since the holes were drilled at an angle, it wasn't practical to make them at the drill press. Assembly was as easy as it gets. I squeezed a bead of glue onto the bottom of the giraffe, spread it around with my fingertip, and centered the giraffe on the base. I grabbed a large spring clamp from the rack behind me to see if it would fit between the giraffe's legs. It did, so I clamped the two pieces together. The clamp will ensure a more secure glue joint. Once the glue is dried, I'll give these a couple coats of spray polyurethane, add a pencil, and they'll be ready to sell. Here's the completed giraffe pencil holder. It was difficult to get a good photo of it because it's so tall and skinny. It doesn't fit a horizontal frame very well. It was a fun and easy project, and it's getting great comments. You may want to make several, one for yourself and the rest as gifts. I'm in the midst of several projects, so make sure you're subscribed and you hit the notification bell. Until the next video, suggestions for what to watch next are on the screen.